learned a long time ago, I don't question God anymore. We were in church and the other pastor decided to leave. Everybody turned to me and said, can you fill in until the end of the year, get us through the holidays? That was October. November of 2023 was the congregational meeting, and my wife said, have you found a new pastor? And they said, we stopped looking back in February. We kind of got the church by default, and they asked, well, how long are you going to be here? I said, till God tells me to leave, and right now he hasn't had that discussion with me, but we're not planning on going anywhere. I want to make sure that if we would ever leave, that we would leave the church bigger and better than when we received it.
Welcome back to the Christians of Brevard Pastor Podcast. I'm here with Pastor Jan Cary of Trinity Lutheran Church in Titusville. They are a Lutheran church affiliated with the Lutheran Congregation in Missions for Christ, or LCMC. The congregation was founded in 1961 and is still worshiping in their original sanctuary today off of South Hopkins Avenue. Pastor Jan, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Connor. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We were just talking before the podcast, though. It's a little chilly, so that's the only downside to the day.
Yeah, I'm not happy with it.
Now, I'm a native-born Floridian, so I'm really not down with the cold.
I'm not native-born, but I'm still, my blood thinned out in 2005, so.
Is that when you came to Florida?
Yeah, we moved here in 2005.
Gotcha. Where did you come from?
I was a chief of police in Fort Valley, Georgia, and then prior to that, we lived in New Mexico for most of my law enforcement career and my wife's life, so.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple questions about that when we get into the podcast. But maybe first off, if you can tell me a little bit about Trinity Lutheran. I understand you started pastoring there in 2022.
Yes.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about how you ended up in the pastorship, though.
We started going to the church there because my dad went there, and we had just decided we would go to church with him. He was 93. We just thought it was the right thing to do, just to honor my dad, because he just wanted to have the family together. And my dad has lived with us since we've been married, so 28 years. Well, 26 before he died. We were in church, and the other pastor decided to leave, and everybody turned to me and said, can you fill in until the end of the year, get us through the holidays? That was October. So we got him through the holiday. And then they said, well, can you stay until we find a new pastor? And I said, sure. So November of 2023 was the congregational meeting, and my wife said, have you found a new pastor? And they said, no, why? And they said, well, we just need to know what we're going to do with our life. She goes, well, we stopped looking back in February. So we kind of got the church by default. And it's been a good thing for us. We never anticipated to be pastors. I mean, it just happened that way. And so that's how we ended up there.
Did you grow up Lutheran, or what's the story there?
You know, it's interesting. I was raised Lutheran back in Pennsylvania, and my dad he was a Christmas and Easter kind of guy. And it wasn't until we came to Florida that he started going to church, and he dove in with both feet. So, I mean, that's how he ended up there. And he found it very fulfilling, and we seem to fit in there.
Do you know much about the history of Trinity Lutheran?
I don't. I mean, most of the people, as you met them, have been there almost since the beginning.
Yeah.
It is a senior congregation. My wife is at 62, is one of the youngest in the congregation. It's a very loving group of people, which, you experienced that yourself when you visited us. We are conservative. We have introduced, my wife and I have introduced a more hybrid form of worship than the straight liturgical worship that you're experiencing in the Lutheran Church. We have open communion. We aren't restrictive. If your heart is right with God, and you're welcome to take and share communion with us. We have communion every week. We inject some more contemporary issues or experience in the worship, but we retain our liturgy. But we did away with liturgical prayer and instead went to actual laying on of hands and touching people when we pray. We just feel that it's a better worship experience to have people touch you, pray with you, and not just recite common prayer.
Yeah, I was diving a little bit into your bio. So I understand you went to Anderson Theological Seminary, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's broadly Baptist, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then I know we spoke a little bit before coming to Trinity Lutheran. I think you said you would probably describe yourself as more in the non-denominational camp. But now you say you were raised Lutheran. So kind of what has been the experience there navigating all these different traditions?
Well, I was raised Lutheran, but I was a kid. And, after high school and then at the beginning of my adult years, I became involved in a non-denominational church in Pennsylvania. And that's where I found a lot of satisfaction. And then from there, I went to a Bible college in San Antonio at International Bible College and got my bachelor's degree. Then I went, and that was in 1981. And then through a divorce, my expectations of ministry kind of went away. And so I went into I had an opportunity to go into law enforcement, and I did. And I was in law enforcement for 35 years. And then I retired in 2018. And in preparation for that, in praying, where does God want to lead my wife and I, we decided we would start a ministry to first responders in which we provide free pastoral care and counseling to first responders and their families. And we started a nonprofit. I went to Andersonville Theological Seminary, got my master's degree in Christian counseling. I'm a licensed pastoral clinical counselor with the National Christian Counselors Association. That got us the credentials that we needed to counsel with people. Then I went back to Andersonville and got my doctorate in biblical exposition. And that was just because I wanted to. And that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years is ministering to first responders. We're chaplains at the Melbourne Police Department. My wife and I are certified marriage mentors. We're certified relationship facilitators. We are certified cancer care ministers through the Cancer Centers of America. We just really, felt the need to give back to first responders. That's why we ended up. The church, the ministry, the pastor at the church is just kind of icing on the cake. I'm not a full-time pastor. I'm a part-time pastor. So the church isn't big enough to warrant a full-time pastor, but that's basically me in a nutshell.
Was it the ministry to first responders that brought you to the Melbourne, Brevard County area, or was it more of your father?
We moved here because I started to work at Port Canaveral, and then I left Port Canaveral and went to work for the state. And I spent my last 10 years in law enforcement with the state of Florida, so that's basically why we're here. I didn't know what to do after retirement, and so we started to pray about it, and then God very clearly impressed upon us that, this is the direction. This is what 35 years of experience and all your training in ministry, this is how you give back. And I found that, you need to have a spiritual grounding to be in law enforcement or to be a first responder. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. And so having that spiritual grounding, whatever it is, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, but it's not saying that anybody I believe, has to have some type of spiritual grounding to know that there is a supreme being that's guiding their life.
And you said you were a chaplain, I think, you said for Melbourne
Police Department. Right. We helped them revitalize their chaplaincy starting in 2018. And then we have about 6 volunteer chaplains.
Are you finding that they're supportive of that? Are they open to that ministry?
Yeah, they're very open to, but it's like, it's a tough road to hoe with these young cops. They're not really sure how to take a chaplain. So it's a challenge, but when they do remember, hey, we have a chaplain, let's call him, it's beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I know I started the chaplaincy program in 1991 at the sheriff's department where I worked in New Mexico. My sheriff came to me and said, hey, you've got a bachelor's degree in theology, start a chaplain's program.
Mm-hmm.
So I contacted pastors that I knew and said, hey, do you want to be a chaplain? They're like, yeah, sure. And so that's how we started it. And then it continued. I stayed I started with that department in 1986, and then in 1994, I got elected sheriff, and then I stayed for one term, and so we kept a chaplaincy from 91 till, well, it's still going on, in fact.
That's amazing. Any plans to kind of expand that ministry here in Brevard County, maybe with Titusville PD?
Well, Titusville has active chaplains, but we aren't necessarily chaplains. We refer to ourselves as chaplains on steroids. We take it that one step further because of our experience. My wife and I have been married 28 years, and 35 years in law enforcement gives us a good background on what goes on in a cop's or a first responder's brain. And I've been there when they go, you don't understand what I'm going through, but when they understand that you do know what you're going through and what you have gone through, it breaks down that wall. And it's just not like, well, it's a pastor who's a chaplain and he doesn't understand what I'm going, what I'm thinking. And I do. I've been there. I've been through a divorce. I've been through, people dying and all the stressors that these cops go through now. I've experienced it. My wife has experienced being a cop's wife. And so we understand. And so that gives us that leg up that when we counsel these young people and these marriages that are in crisis, we have a level playing field. And they know that we're coming from the same thing that they're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a very useful program for.
Yeah, I hope to expand it. I mean, we do a lot of stuff on Zoom, and this year we'll begin a greater outreach to reach out other parts of the state and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned the name of your ministry, but it's StoneShield Ministries.
Right. So
and is it really primarily locally focused, or you guys deal with?
No, we can go wherever God sends us. I mean, we just happen to be based in Florida, but I mean, with Zoom or with Riverside, like we're using now, we can counsel people online. The testing process that we use for our marriage encounters provides us with a 16-page report on your marriage or your relationship or potential marriage. We do some premarital counseling also. And it gives us this readout with money, with sex, communication, everything you can think about. And it shows us the minefield that perhaps you might be in. It shows us the positives, and it helps us work these couples through some of their issues.
Well, that's beautiful. I hope it does continue to expand in Brevard County, because I think cops here and first responders could really use that type of support.
Yeah, we're praying that God opens the doors, and right now, God has been opening doors. As we leave one couple, another one shows up. So God hasn't overloaded us.
Well, maybe we pull it back to the church there, Trinity Lutheran again. But when you took over in 2022, I mean, what kind of your goals for the church as it hopefully grows?
It was to stabilize it, Connor, mainly. I mean, that was the thing, is stabilizing it, getting people to feel good about the church, and to feel that there was a future. They were in financial straits prior to that, but that was because of COVID. It hurt a lot of people. So we came in as part-time pastors, and that helped a lot on the budget, and that took a lot of stress off the church. And so now our objective is to grow the church. And we realize that, I mean, we have a great facility, but it's not being used. But we also realize that maybe our mission isn't to have a nursery. Our mission is to seniors, to adults who want to find a congregation where they can feel comfortable. I mean, you were there. They're very comfortable to interact during a sermon, and we've got them used to that, where they can ask a question during a sermon, or they can make comment. And sometimes we force them to comment to us, but we want to make the worship experience meaningful to them, to make them want to come to church. And we preach Jesus. That's the main thing. We're conservative in our attitudes. We preach Jesus, and we preach from Scripture. We don't necessarily follow a liturgical calendar anymore. I use it as a guide. The reason I say that is if you look at the liturgical calendar that they send out, I think it was last year or the first year we were there, the Bible, the scripture references and readings for the gospel were for the crucifixion. So I'm like, why are we teaching the crucifixion during Christmas? So we moved away from that. And now, when Advent comes, then we stick with it there. And then it gives me the freedom from January until Lent to pretty much preach what God lays on my heart. And then when Lent comes, then we'd go Lent to Easter and the resurrection and the ascension. And then we take a break from that, and we are pretty much free reign through the summer. So that's the thought process behind it.
Right. And I know when we were talking after the service, when I did visit, actually, funny enough, I saw you posting in our Facebook group, so I kind of put it on my docket that I wanted to go visit Trinity Lutheran eventually. But before I found your church, I found another Trinity Lutheran, which is in Rockledge.
Yes.
So I guess I was in your church.
No.
But they're kind of in an honestly a very similar situation to you guys. Actually, probably maybe a little bit of a step back. They're still looking for a pastor, their full-time pastor. There's a guy who drives up. Gosh, I think he might drive up from West Palm, but it's a little bit of a ways, and he's, filling in for now. But same situation, they have a beautiful building that they've kind of struggled to find the use for with the congregation there. One thing they do have is Trinity Lutheran School also uses that facility. So that helps them a lot with the support there. I think it is a shame. I love the traditions of faith in Brevard, and I think it would be good for us to look at preserving not really just local churches, but that lineage of Christianity that has been established in Brevard County for a long time, and respecting that as we're also looking to move into the future. And the church has been there since 1961. The building itself, I think, since 1962.
Yes.
So there's a lot of history. There's a lot of faithfulness, in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride that we have in the church. I'm very proud to be the pastor there, and God has placed us where He wants us. And I learned a long time ago, I don't question God anymore. If He says, here's where you're going to be, and they ask, well, how long are you going to be here? I said, well, till God tells me to leave. And right now He hasn't had that discussion with me, but we're not planning on going anywhere. I want to make sure that if we would ever leave, that we would lead the church bigger and better than when we received it.
Yeah, and looking into the LCMC affiliation, I think they don't want to call themselves a denomination, but it seems like they're pretty open to local congregations kind of forming their own services.
That's one of the things I like is that we're basically self-governing.
Right.
We call the pastor. I mean, I'm not ordained Lutheran. I mean, you and I discussed that. My wife and I are the elders of the Florida portion of the National Association of Christian Ministers, and we have over 1,200 ministers in Florida. And so my wife and I are the state elders, and then we have a gentleman over in the Bradenton area that is the local elder, and he helps us out. So my ordination is through them, but I'm also ordained through our ministry. So I'm not ordained Lutheran, and that doesn't bother the church. They knew right up front, and it hasn't been an issue.
Well, and like you said, too, kind of in your process of looking at revitalizing the church and growing it, you guys have been blending some of the traditional liturgical elements with some of these maybe more modern, contemporary elements of the worship and the laying on of hands. Have you had any sort of from the congregation, like some of these people that have been there since, like you said, the church was chartered in 1961? Has there been any pushback, or they're totally open to it, or what?
The congregation is comfortable enough to tell me what they like and what they don't like. I mean, I had one that came to me, she goes, I don't like to hold hands. I said, then don't. You don't have to hold your own hand. You don't have to hold hands with anybody. Hold your own hand or just pray. Like we say the Lord's Prayer, and then I interjected singing the Lord's Prayer because I personally find that much more fulfilling. When you just recite the Lord's Prayer, you're reciting it. and there's not a lot of thought process, and you're saying something you've said, like in my case, 71 years I've been saying it. But when you sing the Lord's Prayer, it's much more as a devotion. And so we injected that, but then I had a congregant that said, I really miss saying the Lord's Prayer, and some other people did too. So now we alternate. One week we sing it, one week we recite it. And the best part about it is when we recite the Lord's Prayer and I look back and I see that congregant that requested it, and she's all smiles. and that
Yeah.
that makes you feel good.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In some of the very traditional churches, they'll sing the whole liturgy. Everything is even the spoken parts are like chanted in this kind of
Yeah,
sing
I'm not a chanter. And
Well, the reason I bring that up is just because I had someone explain to me once that the reason that practice kind of was brought about is that singing is like a glorified way of speaking. So when you enter into the church, it's just like how singing the Lord's Prayer is maybe almost a higher devotion. It's a way
yeah,
of glorifying what we're doing in the presence of God. So I mean, I think there's a lot of legitimacy too. I was raised in a non-denominational background. I come, very much from that, but I do like elements of some of the more traditional practices too.
I think we found a pretty good balance in which we have, there is some singing, but there's also recitation of liturgy. And I'm more comfortable with that because I don't have a singing voice. And so I'm not even going to try. I mean, I tried and it doesn't work. And our church would probably be smaller if I was singing in the liturgy.
I don't know.
But I think we found a balance.
Is there maybe one thing that you could say you're appreciative of the Lutheran tradition coming from, as you have Baptist and non-denominational, you've been around the block a little bit?
One of the things that you have to look at is there wouldn't be a non-denominational church or any other churches had it not been for Martin Luther. I mean, up until that time, for the most part, it was the Catholic Church. But, when Luther made that split, that's what started everything. You now have the Catholic Church and Luther splits, and that's what opens the door for what we have today, non-denominational churches, the Methodists, the Wesleyan, all of those. They would have never, I can't say they would never, but that split that Luther made 500 plus years ago is what opened the door for all the advancements of different denominations.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, so was Luther a perfect guy? No. I mean, if you look at his history, but I mean, who is perfect? Who doesn't say things that are going to offend somebody? I mean, you just can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about the future. What does Trinity Lutheran envision for itself heading into maybe the next 5 years to decade?
We are just installing a new board, so we have a new president. I don't know what she's going to do as far as her plans.
The president of the local church there, or
Yeah,
was
the
this
local
the
church council. Yeah, the local
Okay.
church council. I don't know what her plans are exactly, but I know she's very invested in the church. She's a lifelong member there. And so that's encouraging. And I rely on these lifelong members to give me the guidance of, here's what we used to do we didn't like. Here's what we'd like to try. And I'm the kind of guy, even when I was in law enforcement, I don't want to ever be put in a situation where they say, have you ever tried this? I want to go say, yeah, we tried it and it didn't work. I want to see the church grow. And we feel that our mission, our ministry and our mission is going to be to those adults, maybe empty nesters, but mostly adults. I mean, we have a way to have children. The church used to have children there, had a nursery. We have a nursery. We have Sunday school rooms. We have all those things, but it's kind of hard to attract families with children because they'd have to come in and start their own ministry. So we have more or less taken the thought process of we need to look at the adults and make sure that the adults, the over 35 young adults or young marrieds or old marrieds can find a place to be comfortable and worship God. I'm not a laser and smoke kind of guy. No rock band, no nightclub stuff. It's just,
Well, you did make it snow, you said recently, though,
we did
right?
make it snow. You missed it, and I
I
invited
did.
you.
I
Uh,
know.
that's one of the benefits of having a friend that's in special effects. So if
Mm.
you've been to Disney and watched it snow, we made it snow like it did at Disney. It's kind of neat because it was for Christmas Eve, and they had to walk through the snow to get into the sanctuary, and it was kind of neat to see people coming in with snow in their hair. Granted, it was soap, but snow in their hair and snow on their clothes, and it made you really. It would have been appropriate if it would have been this temperature outside.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we did make it snow, and then we made it. That was Christmas Eve, and then the following Sunday we made it snow again because I figured I've got the special effects machine. I might as well use it.
You got to use it. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it would be great to see Trinity Lutheran continue on into the future as it has since 1961. So I think there's a lot of opportunity too in Titusville, for that. Maybe just as we're closing out, you said you came to the area in Brevard County in
2005.
2005.
Yes.
So you've been here a
Mhm.
little bit now. Talking about Titusville, talking about Brevard County. I know you do work in Melbourne too. What's kind of your read on the area? Do you think there are any things here, issues in Brevard County that the church could really provide a solution to, and what type of, what would that look like?
What we do, we partner with Lifepointe Ministries, is 2 blocks down the road, and they have an outreach to the homeless, and they have the only cold weather shelter in North Brevard. And so we partner with them by storing all their equipment at our facility. We make donations to them. Like last year during Super Bowl, we had a sock party in which we had 2 tubs, one for each team in the Super Bowl, and you brought in socks and as a donation. And you put it in the bin for the team you wanted to win the Super Bowl. And I think we collected 160 pairs of socks that we gave to Lifepointe. So Pastor Morrison down there, we have a good relationship, and he knows he can count on us if there's something that he needs. Like if he's gone and he needs somebody to fill in, he'll contact me. I'm going to be out of town. He's going to fill in for me. But I think mainly we want to, if there are people searching, we'd like you to come try us. Don't let the term Lutheran scare you away. We're Lutheran in name, but we're Jesus in spirit. That's the main thing. Is I don't preach any politics from the pulpit. I don't think that has its place. We want to talk about it offline. That's fine. But I think really the main thing is, can you go someplace, get fed, learn about the Bible, have a good worship experience, and leave knowing, hey, God and I communicated today. I made contact with God, and God spoke to me. And it's not my job to get you into heaven. It's my job to point you in the direction. And you've got to make that decision. If you're looking for a place that you want a little structure, but you still want some freedom to worship, I think our church is the place to be. We're not grounded in rules and regulations. I'll be there as long as God has me. And services are at 9:30. We have Bible study on Wednesdays at 11. And they're always very spirited. And we have a good congregation. If you like to quilt, I've got a group of quilting ladies, and we provide quilts to AMVETS, the Shriners Hospital. When we have police memorial or fire memorial, whoever shows up gets a quilt. I would just encourage people to try us out and just say, oh, it's a Lutheran church. And it's like, well, we're not your normal Lutheran church.
Sure. And on top of the personal aspect of going somewhere where you get fed and you can worship God and you can, fulfill, I guess, your Christian duties that way. There's also the aspect of being in community with fellow believers and having that support network when you need it, but also something that you can contribute to, like you guys contribute to Lifepointe. The stronger we can kind of build those community
Right.
ties, the stronger the church is in the area, and the more we can see impact in Titusville and Melbourne and Brevard. And that's really the beauty of what the church is. I'm not sure what the statistics are there in Titusville, but I know for the rest of the county, I mean, it's something like closer to 40%, I think, of people here are unchurched. So it's probably somewhat similar in Titusville. There's definitely a lot of people going around that, maybe a lot of them are de-churched too, which means they used to go to church, but now they don't. So
Yes.
these are believers who, were saved, probably were baptized, and just have fallen away from it. So there's lots of people that would benefit from being in community and fellowship at a
Yes.
church like Trinity.
This spring, we're going to have another baptism. We had a baptism 2 years ago, right when I took over, and I baptized. We went to the ocean, and I baptized 8 of my congregants in the ocean, and they wanted to be baptized, and so we've got some other people that have expressed a desire. So when the weather clears up in the spring, uh, we'll do a baptism. I cheat. I wear a wetsuit because I'm in the water all the time. So we do immersion baptism, and that comes from my roots. I mean, when I got saved, I got baptized in a creek in Pennsylvania on my birthday in November. I had to break the ice
Oof.
in the creek to get baptized. So when you came out of the water, you were saved.
Well, just a final question then as we close out. Maybe you can tell people where they can find you guys if they're interested. Maybe they're one of these de-churched folks who aren't going to a church right now. Maybe they want to get baptized themselves. How can they find you? How can they find Trinity Lutheran?
Trinity Lutheran Church is located at 3671 South Hopkins in Titusville. Our services are Sunday at 9:30, Wednesday for Bible study at 11. I'm available at 321-848-2012. And if you know a first responder or their family that is in need of some assistance or just needs somebody to talk to that understands what they've gone through, please give us a call. And if not, we'll see you Sundays at 9:30.
Thanks so much for joining me, Pastor Jen.